Due to some violent content, parental discretion is advised.
Stream of magic, he serves a ring to Saturn and lots of shooting stars. The mutant mothership is inside the car. UFOs coming out, it's going to be with time forever. Take a tell us, soldiers find you with hero eye in the sky. Streamer-rama, streamer-rama, streamer-rama.
A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, there was Star Wars. And today we have The Mandalorian. Welcome back, fellow mutants. This is Skribo-Rama here for Indie Film Reviews, and today I would like to discuss The Mandalorian. I couldn't decide if I wanted to talk about this in a spoiler-filled fashion or spoiler-free, so I'm going to do it spoiler-free. I don't know why, because it seems like everybody is watching this show anyway. On Disney Plus, the price is pretty low, which is cool. Makes it super affordable, has a ton of great content, provided you don't already own most of that stuff anyway. Yeah, because I've, of course, have all this Star Wars stuff on DVD or Blu-ray or VHS, and I even have old bootlegs of the Star Wars Holiday Special, which they were not kind enough to upgrade to 4K. But I digress. Since most people tune out before the very end of this video, give this a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, join me on Twitter, join the group on Facebook, give me some feedback. What would you like me to talk about and in what fashion? If not, I'll just keep on going the way that we're going. So a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, there was Star Wars, and today we have The Mandalorian. And I'm trying to remember if I did a reaction or a preview for the trailer. I meant to. I might have got caught up in that horrible slump where I had to talk about the Birds of Prey trailer and Batwoman and a few of those things. So I might have fallen into that trap for a little while, that heart-shaped box for weeks. But now we shall lower down our umbilical noose and climb right back with thanks to Kurt Cobain, because I want to discuss The Mandalorian and tell you straight up, I thought it was awesome. The whole time I'm watching it, I'm waiting for the swerve that's going to drive me nuts. Like it's a woman. I kept thinking this is a woman. Watching the trailer, because the build of the Mandalorian character is very slight and slim. I thought it's going to be a woman. It's going to be a woman. That's where we are. We can't have cool, badass dudes in shows anymore. Dude meaning a guy, okay? People tend to use dude as a non-gendered term, but yeah, in this case, a guy. You know, we just can't have cool guys doing cool, badass things anymore. You know, we've kind of just moved beyond that. But no. It appeared to be a guy through the whole show. So we didn't get that kind of stupid swerve. Now, all my videos get flagged no matter what I do with these stupid clips. So, c'est la vie. We'll let it get flagged. I just dug it. For Star Wars fans, especially longtime Star Wars fans, it is filled with little Easter eggs from everywhere. Apparently, it's set 5 years after Return of the Jedi, which I don't think is explicitly stated during the show. That was Gina Carano in that one clip right there. Now, for a minute, when I saw this teaser trailer, I thought Gina Carano was going to be. If you don't know who Gina Carano is, she was one of the first Strike Force women's champions back when there was a Strike Force in mixed martial arts, or MMA as it is now widely known. I think that shot's pre-Gina Carano. Where'd she go? Well, I don't know. I'm trying to back it up to show you one thing here. But the show is just awesome. This is going to be just a rambling, horrible review, apparently. Directed by Dave Filoni, who brought us the immaculate Clone Wars series, which I absolutely... that's Gina Carano right there. Let's see if I can catch her on there again. Coming. Here she comes. Boy, that's a long 10 seconds on this thing when you bounce back. Right there, that's Gina Carano. Okay. Super badass chick. I was a big fan of her as a fighter. But she actually wasn't in this episode. Neither were any of those characters. Carl Weathers does make an appearance. But man, there are some cool Easter eggs in this thing. Okay, straight up, what makes it awesome? If you've been following any film reviews at all and you listen to some of my early episodes where I talked about my disappointment with Star Wars, aside from the fact that things were done during the last few films where long established characters were acted out of character and really treated shamefully by the creators, speaking specifically of Rian Johnson's treatment of Luke Skywalker. Even Mark Hamill himself said it, so I don't know why anybody can kind of get their panties in a wad about constantly bringing it up. Ask Mark Hamill if you don't believe me, okay? What the other element that was missing from these new Star Wars films, even The Force Awakens, which I really, really enjoyed, is the samurai aesthetic that George Lucas used, taking inspiration from old Akira Kurosawa films, specifically things like The Hidden Fortress or The Seven Samurai. Those are probably the two that have the largest influence on what became Star Wars. And Hidden Fortress is a very, very, very close, almost in a beat-by-beat fashion. It's very close. Well, Star Wars is a close analog in that it parallels a lot of the Hidden Fortress in almost beat-by-beat way, except there's no actual Death Star. It's a Hidden Fortress. But anyway, what this show gets right is not necessarily that it brings back the samurai aesthetic, though there are a few moments of that which were great, absolutely great, when they showed the Mandalorian dealing with another Mandalorian, where they kind of expand on the Mandalorian mythos a little bit. But the fact that they bring back the Western aesthetic, the cowboy aesthetic, which was a huge influence on Star Wars as well. I mean, aside from Flash Gordon and Akira Kurosawa, there were cowboys. There was the Western, I mean, because that's Han Solo, the cantina, all that. That's straight up Western stuff. That's Western mythology. And that kind of stuff has been influencing filmmakers all across the world. I mean, John Ford was a big influence on Akira Kurosawa. I mean, so it goes around and around. Ford influenced Kurosawa. Kurosawa influences George Lucas, John Ford influenced George Lucas. So it has that cowboy aesthetic, which is just absolutely incredible. It's a show about a bounty hunter. I mean, you know that from watching this trailer. That's pretty much all you need to know. I love the look of the stormtrooper helmets on the pikes. That's just so cool. So cool. And I love that the Mandalorian is flying around what looks to be a beat up, right there you see it. This looks to be a beat up old Republic fighter ship. I think we first saw in Attack of the Clones in episode 2. But anyway, so the Mandalorian is played by Pedro Pascal, who was just phenomenal, and he was great in Game of Thrones as the Sand Viper. What was his character's name? He stole that entire season of Game of Thrones with that character. Oh, man, I can't think of his name now. That always happens when you get a mic in front of you and you're trying to remember little bits of trivia like that, and they will just completely fly away from your mind. But this Mandalorian, man, they did a great job bringing in Dave Filoni to direct this. I mean, and Filoni, he really won me over with the Clone Wars series. When it started, I didn't care for the movie. I didn't care for the early episodes. But by season 2, it started to get really good. Really good. By focusing more on the Jedis. And we got to see more of the Jedi Order, which was the stuff that I always wanted to see. And by the time they got to season 3, 4 and 5, especially 4 and 5, were phenomenal. You know, they were putting on the small screen what I really wanted from what is called the prequel trilogy of Star Wars, episodes 1, 2, and 3. And the show absolutely won me over. I was devastated when it was summarily canceled by Disney as soon as they bought out the entire, as soon as they bought Star Wars, the IP or intellectual property. And they made everything non-canon. Everything that had been created up to that point, except for the films, they made it non-canon. Except for the films and except for the Clone Wars. Those are the only things they left as absolute canon. And I'm glad they left the Clone Wars as canon, at least. So we still have that kind of tie-in. Though now, since I have, but just been bitterly disappointed by the return of Luke, Han, and Leia, the only way I can see any kind of further adventures of them is to go back and read what is now the expanded universe or the extended universe of Star Wars, or I guess now it's called the Legacy, Star Wars Legacy material, which were the series of novels that came out, like the Timothy Zahn novels. Those were incredible. They couldn't adapt those into a film or series of films. Those were incredible. The Zahn trilogy was great. It was absolutely great. Great space opera, high adventure, cool Jedi stuff, clones, weird Sith stuff, Luke doing cool Luke stuff, introduction of Mara Jade, introduction of Grand Admiral Thrawn, the first Grand Admiral. I mean, that was just fascinating. But I digress. I'm getting totally off the beaten path of discussing The Mandalorian here. But this is spoiler-free, so I'm just trying to remind you of all the good things about it without actually telling you all of the plot points. Growing up, Boba Fett was always one of my favorite characters, though he does very, very little in the actual films. He's not in Star Wars at all. But something very interesting happened, and I know this because I was there for it, and I had the original Boba Fett figure. You had to send off proofs of purchases for it. He appeared before The Empire Strikes Back came out, and he was also part of that 12-inch series of figures. So he appeared in between movies. His first appearance was actually in the holiday special, Star Wars Holiday Special, which is why it's cool that they have a couple very, very quick nods. And this is the way you should do Easter eggs. They're throwaway moments where if you have no idea that is referencing the Star Wars Holiday Special, it doesn't ruin the show for it. It doesn't stop the entire show and go, hey, look at this moment, and then just leave you confused. It just happens and it passes. Where if you understand it and you have knowledge of that show, you go, oh, well, that's a cool little thing. That's what an Easter egg should be, where it's something that you find and something you enjoy. But for the most part, I thought, man, this thing beat by beat was awesome. And going into it, I didn't realize Dave Filoni had directed it. I mean, I thought he was producing it or something, and I probably did hear or read at some point that he was directing at least the first episode. But it's so long back. I've adopted the attitude that I don't want to read too much behind-the-scenes information on certain things that I want to be good, like Star Wars films, for example, or, a Star Wars show. I don't need to know all the behind-the-scenes stuff, okay? It's bad enough that I have my own understanding of storytelling and mythology and that sort of thing, because I cannot help but apply that to anything that I watch, which makes it so hard for me to find things that are of quality that really make me happy. So I try not to read a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. So I like to go into things blind. At the most, I want to watch the teaser, a couple trailers, that's it. No, don't show me behind-the-scenes stuff before I see it. I don't need any on-the-set stories, none of that stuff. Just let me watch a good trailer, sell me on the product, and then let me go into it with the expectations built upon the name of the show, the name that's on the marquee, okay? So if it says The Mandalorian on the marquee, there better be a damn Mandalorian somewhere in that show. If I watch the whole thing, if it's Rian Johnson and I get to the end of it and there's no Mandalorian, I subverted your expectations. You thought there was going to be a Mandalorian in this. You stupid fools. No. Bad Rian Johnson. Bad. If you call it The Mandalorian, there has to be a Mandalorian in it. And there was a Mandalorian in this, and he's in the whole show, and it's great. It's absolutely great. It's a bounty hunter story set in Star Wars. You can tell it's low budget to the extent in comparison to like the big budget films, even like a big budget Star Trek film, because all of the really fantastic elements are very quick. You know, if there's a big CGI monster or ship or landscape or vista, it's quick. You get a few seconds of it, and then we're back focused on the characters. They're back in familiar settings like this, in a Western-looking, this sort of Adobe, Western. I don't know what that kind of architecture is called. You see it a lot out west, especially California, Mexico, that sort of thing. You get back to just focusing close in on the characters. You don't have the big wide, space battles or what have you. So the budget they have, they use it excellently. The costumes are great. The makeups are great. The acting was good all the way through. The Mandalorian was just badass, just like in that clip there. I mean, he does stuff like that through the whole thing. Oh, I keep derailing myself. So anyway, Boba Fett. Boba Fett was the original Mandalorian, okay? Now, how did I learn he was a Mandalorian? I think it was because on the original action figure card, or on one of the later action figure cards, it said he's a Mandalorian, okay? And the only thing that we knew about Mandalorians was they always wore their armor, and they were just these relentless warriors. And then somewhere along the way, I think it was during the original Marvel Star Wars comic series, which for a long, long time was the only expanded universe we had. I mean, we had a few, an expansion of the Star Wars universe anyway. I mean, we had a few novel tie-ins. Okay, there were things like Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which wound up being non-canonized almost instantly. Okay, and then there were some other things like Han Solo's series of novels and Lando Calrissian series, but nothing with like Luke and Leia and everybody. Not until the Zahn trilogy, years later. So those Marvel comics were Star Wars in between the movies. I mean, the first comics, the first Star Wars comics, which adapted Star Wars, were released before the film. I mean, it was part of the build-up to and the creation of anticipation for Star Wars. So I think it was around issue 50, maybe around issue 60 or so. This is after The Empire Strikes Back has come out, and Boba Fett has been established as a character on screen. We're introduced to a character named Finn Shisa, who is another Mandalorian. Okay, and it's actually, there's a long storyline. I'll spoil the Marvel comics for you, because now they're considered non-canon, though in my head they're canon. They're still there. They still exist. They still happen. They're still the only real Star Wars stories we have for those years. But Luke and Leia and everybody, they're looking for Boba Fett because he has Han Solo. So in those years between Empire and the release of Return of the Jedi, they continued that storyline where they were out looking for Boba Fett, trying to get Han back. And they wind up running into Finn Shisa, who is another Mandalorian. And I think that's where I learned a little bit more of the background of it and whatnot. And at one point, I think it's explained that the Mandalorians were wiped out by the Jedi. That they had like this big clash of some sort, and they got wiped out. And I think we see some of that in the Clone Wars, and maybe a little bit of a reflection of it in Star Wars Rebels. In that Obi-Wan has like a series of adventures on Mandalore, which were really, really cool. Though we never saw like a big Mandalorian army versus a Jedi army. We never saw that played out. But so that made Boba Fett extra cool in that there were very few Mandalorians left. He wasn't like the last Mandalorian, but he was one of the last. There were very few of them in existence. And then yeah, we could say shame on George Lucas for the way that he killed off Boba Fett. I was actually bummed out about that the first time I saw that in Return of the Jedi, and how Fett just kind of goes flying into the Sarlacc pit. And it's like, come on, really? You're going to kill him like that? But at least he didn't do it in a totally stupid, out-of-character way, like, hey, I'm going to fly into this Sarlacc pit and surprise you. I mean, at least it happened as a natural consequence of the flow of action. But so I was always a fan of Mandalorians. try to get this back on track. So to see this realize, come to screen, be released, good acting, great effects, cool, simple story. It's a bounty hunter. He's going after bounties. The first episode, he runs into a droid. You see the shot of the droid here in the trailer, which is a reference to IG-88, who was another bounty hunter in The Empire Strikes Back. See, those are little Easter eggs that nerds, geeks like me, we just love. So I love that kind of stuff. There's even a bit of Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid feel to this, or the Wild Bunch, especially with the Gatling gun. Gatling gun always came out as like the ultimate Western weapon in those old cowboy films. Anytime, it was always the bad guys had the big Gatling gun, and then the good guy would get a hold of it at some point and just lay waste to everybody. So it was just phenomenal. It was absolutely phenomenal. I loved it. I loved the ending. It was a great little cliffhanger. Something very simple. Keep you interested until next week. I like that Disney is releasing these in an episodic serial fashion instead of like Netflix where they just dump everything at once. I mean, I think that is cool. I'm going on a totally another tangent for you, but that's what we do here at Indie Film Reviews. We analyze media. We analyze our consumption of media, okay? I think it's cool that Netflix just dumps everything at once and you can binge watch it, as the kids like to say. I call it power watching. Don't be a mindless idiot, okay? It's power watching. Not everything needs to have a negative connotation to it. And you can just sit there and watch all of them right in a row if you want to. But in doing that, you miss that week of waiting. You miss that week of anticipation. You miss that week of speculation between shows. What did that mean at the end of that episode? Who was that? What was that? Where are they going? And you think about it for a week, and you build the story up in your mind, and then you tune in with breathless anticipation to find out, well, what was it? Where did they go? What happened? And that is an entirely different way of consuming these serial narratives as opposed to power watching, where you lose all that. You're just like, oh, that was awesome. I'm going to watch the next episode. Just bing, bing. That's the digital generation now. Bing, bing, play now. That was good. Play now. Play now. Play now. Play now. Want it now. Want it now. Want it now. Want it now. No patience. No imagination on the part of the audience. But here we have it. We got a great story. Cool character. Builds on a cool timeline in the Star Wars universe. 5 years after Return of the Jedi, which 5 years after Return of the Jedi places it in the timeline of the Timothy Zahn novels. The Dark Empire, which was the comic series, was a year after Return of the Jedi. So Timothy Zahn novels, 5 years after. Mandalorian, 5 years after. So you have the Empire has fallen. I imagine there's still remnants everywhere. But it's not what it was, and the New Republic is being formed. But anyway, so it's the first episode. It's cowboys in space. It's a Mandalorian. They didn't take out a picture of Luke Skywalker and burn it in the middle of the show, so that was great. You got what you wanted if you tuned in, and if you're paying for Disney Plus, you get your money's worth, at least for now, while these episodes are coming out. You get your money's worth. So if you haven't checked it out, I recommend it. If you're a Star Wars fan, if your heart was destroyed by The Force Awakens, everything that you loved was tread and spat upon by The Last Jedi, go watch The Mandalorian. At least there aren't any legacy characters like Luke or Leia or Han in it that show up and act out of character that totally ruin it for you. It stays true at least to the mythology and the lore of the Mandalorians. And Disney should take note from this. If we just give people what they want, it's samurais in space, it's cowboys in space. We have these characters which are established over 3 films. Have them keep acting like those characters. Don't change their character in between films and not show us why. Okay? It's show, don't tell. Don't tell me what happened. Show me. You really have to show me something. We have a whole trilogy of films that built this empire of dream, to take the title from that documentary about Star Wars. When you've made billions of fans off of that, you can't make those characters act out of character and betray those characters, and you betray the fan base. Disney should take note. People want to watch Star Wars. They want to enjoy Star Wars. Don't tread upon and destroy what's come before just to use it as a foundation for what you want to build now. Just build something now. Add to it. The Mandalorian is a perfect way to do it. That's all they had to do, was just tell a good story and don't piss on everything that came before it. But the jury is still open. There's still plenty of time for this to go down the toilet. But I'm hopeful. The first episode gave me real hope. It gave me a new hope, if you will. if I may be so bold. And I loved it. And I'm looking forward to the next episode. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Anyway, I've rambled far, far too long about this. And hopefully you gleaned something from that spoiler-free discussion. And maybe I'll talk about the show more in depth as a few episodes go on. And we'll just take this and play it by ear. So this is Strebo. Thanks for watching. Again, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Follow me over on Twitter. Shoot me some questions. Shoot me some comments. What'd you think of The Mandalorian? Let me know. And we'll see you next time. Right here on Indie Film Review.